Toward is a cloud. We are good. Okay. So a couple of quick announcements for you. Don't forget that your quiz is due this afternoon at 5 o'clock. Also, where will you be on Friday? Not here. Yeah, so it's mid-semester break. So Friday will be mid-semester break. I will not be here. You will not be here. But just to kind of let you know how the rest of the next couple of weeks are going to go, next Wednesday, I will be giving out your study guide for your next exam. And that's going to be on the 19th. I hear something playing. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I've got really super sensitive hearing. So, all right. So we are going to finish up our discussion of the census today. If you go to My Cotty and check your lecture notes, I have put up the notes for learning and conditioning. So this week, probably on Wednesday, we are going to watch rats play basketball. Learning and conditioning, you can train wonderful things, including basketball playing rats. You do not get ratatouille. People are not puppets that you can control via rat. That is the second time we brought up people controlling via ratatouille in this semester. I feel like it's a theme. I feel like it's a theme. Okay, so the last time that we were here, we were talking about locating sounds. So one of the things that we know is that you okay? It's okay. It's part of the fun of having those big, heavy metal water bottles now. Whenever they fall, I'm just like, blah! I've got, like I said, I've got really super sensitive hearing. It's really embarrassing how bad my startle response is. And no, it is not getting any better anytime soon. I don't think you can train this out of me. So you have ears that are located 180 degrees from each other. That means that it's going to be really, really easy for you to locate sounds in space. So if you have something over on the right, that is going to hit your right ear first in terms of timing. And it's also going to have a louder intensity because that sound is going to have to travel around the head to reach your left ear, which means it's going to hit a little bit later and it's going to hit a little less intensely, okay? Additionally, we'll see the reverse happens if we have something that's to the left of us. It's going to hit the left ear first with greater intensity. Now, this means that some sounds are going to be easier for us to locate than others. So sounds that are located with the majority to the left or to the right are going to be pretty easy. As we get closer to the midline around the center of the head, that is going to be a little bit more difficult to do. So some sounds are going to be a little bit harder to locate just because there's no clear bias toward the left or the right ear. Now, if I were not recording right now, we would do a demonstration where I snap around your head and it turns out that those center sounds are going to be a little harder to locate. It's going to be hard to find a clear left and a right with those. But because I am recording, we can't necessarily do it right now. All right. So go ahead and write this down. I will take a sip of my water and then we will move on to talking about touch. Now, one thing that I will mention before we move away from hearing, please, please, please protect your ears. So when sounds are traveling through the ear, something that I didn't mention is that the inner ear, that little bony cochlea that we have, it's kind of organized by frequency. So high frequency sounds are closer to the middle ear. So the high pitched sounds are closer to the middle ear and the outer ear than low frequency sounds. And here's what we know. Your hair cells can get damaged by a variety of different things. They can get damaged by certain types of medicines like chemotherapy drugs. They can be damaged through too many ear infections as a child. But probably one of the most common ways that hearing loss happens and damage to hair cells happens is by listening to really loud noises for a prolonged period of time. And many of you, like myself, wear headphones. And that is by and large the number one way that you will get hearing damage, because when the hair cells are damaged by loud sounds, they don't regenerate. These are like one of the few, like the rods and cones in our eyes, they do not regenerate. So that means it's going to be a lot harder to denote high-pitched sounds as you age. So here's where I'm going to sound like an old person. It's probably not the worst idea the next time you go to a concert to wear earplugs. So I went to a Taylor Swift concert back in 2018, back when she was doing the Reputation tour in Kansas City, and I wore, that was 4 years ago, yes. And I wore earplugs, and folks, I could still hear the music. You know what I didn't hear a lot of? A lot of high-pitched screams. I don't like high-pitched screams. Please don't scream at me. I'm like, I do not like it. But you'll still be able to hear the music, and you'll be able to protect your hearing. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so now we're going to talk about touch. Now, touch is a little bit different because touch codes for different types of physical sensations. So touch, first of all, codes for pressure. This is going to be really important anytime that you're trying to hold something. You need to be able to exert and sense a certain amount of pressure to make sure that you're gripping something tightly. If you're not, and it starts to slip from your grasp, you should be able to feel that stretch on the skin and be able to correct for that slippage. So if it's slipping, I can correct it and use a firm amount of pressure to do that. You can also sense this when somebody gives you a very, very loud, well, not loud handshake. How can a handshake be loud? Bless you. Somebody gives you a very, very hard handshake that almost squeezes your hand. So touch allows us to sense pressure. It allows us to sense temperature, both warmth and cold, and it also allows us to sense pain. So we have different types of touch receptors embedded all throughout our skin that are designed for different things. So you don't need to write this down. I'm not going to be testing you on this, but pressure is largely coded by something called the mechanoreceptors. So you have 4 different types of specialized neurons that respond to different types of pressure. You have temperature, which are what are known as thermoreceptors. So they respond to both warmth and cold. And then you have what are known as nociceptors, which respond to pain. If you take biopsych, we will talk more about the mechanoreceptors and the 4 different types and what they are if you're taking that next semester, but you don't need to know about it here. And like we've seen before, these are all specialized neurons that are embedded throughout your skin. And remember, folks, what's your largest organ? It's your skin. Please take care of it. Huh? Yes, wear sunscreen. And not just the makeup that has sunscreen in it, like legit wear sunscreen. You would have to put on way more makeup on your face to get the benefits from that sunscreen. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about pain. Now, who here likes being in pain? Yeah, most people don't. However, pain is essential for our survival. Pain serves as a warning that something is probably bad and is something that could potentially injure you, or worst case scenario, kill you. So pain serves as a warning. So many of you might remember that I told you at the very beginning of the semester, before classes started, I actually got stung in the neck by a wasp about 5 times. Oh, maybe I didn't tell you that. Oh gosh. I was walking home and it hitched a ride on my headphones. And as I was taking my headphones off, I felt like a little electrical type on my neck. And I'm like, wait a minute, my headphones can't do that. And then it kept happening. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's something crawling on my neck. And I threw it down and it was a wasp. And I'm just like, how dare you do that to me? But it was a little scary because it's like I don't know if I'm allergic or not, but Yeah, that was not fun. So that pain was a warning that maybe you don't mess with wasps, even though I really didn't mean to. Additionally, it's a warning that you might be overextending yourself. So my student athletes, and I know I've got a few of you here, how many of you have gotten pain from stretching or pulling something or something like that? Yeah, Maya, what did you do?
Well, but it depends on the stretches, but sometimes I don't stretch, stand up and pull like your leg back to stretch like quads.
Yeah, I love a good quad stretch. Wow. Oof. Ooh.
Sitting down
Yeah, I went for a 6-mile run yesterday. So my hips, I can feel it. I'm like, maybe we should not run today. We should go to yoga. How many of you have strained or pulled something? Woof. Yeah. And I'm not just talking about the athletes at this point. We've all probably done it at some point. That strain and sprain is a warning that maybe we shouldn't do that for a little while. So it is a warning and a message to rest and try to recover. Now, here's what's interesting about pain. We do not have a specific brain area that responds to pain. There is no pain center in the brain. There are a lot of different areas that are involved there. There is even an emotional component to pain. Now, I can tell you that that one is located in, and I am going to write this down, because sometimes it's nice to know the name of things. So the area that is really critical for the emotional component of pain is an area called the anterior cingulate cortex. That's really, really close to the frontal lobe. It's just underneath the frontal lobe, and it has been argued that pain has both a biological, physiological component and an emotional component. And oftentimes what we're going to find is that our sense of pain is absolutely defined by an emotional component as well. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm sorry it's kind of gross. In advance. So the emotional component can really play a role in how much pain you feel. So when I first got to graduate school, it was summer when I got there. And I remember walking around the city, and I had my first cell phone, and I was on the phone with my then boyfriend at the time. And I remember stubbing my toe. I was wearing flip-flops because, well, I came from Florida. That's what we do. We wear flip-flops a lot. And I remember stubbing my toe, but I didn't really feel too bad, and I just kept walking. And eventually, while I was on the phone with him, I felt like my foot was really wet. And I looked down, and my big toe is absolutely covered in blood. I had stubbed my toe on the corner of a metal grate. And it wasn't until I was aware that I was bleeding that it started to hurt. It did not hurt until I was aware that I had been hurt. And that's really what the emotional component of pain is. You can actually push through pain if your emotions are not focused on it. And here's the other thing. Pain can be triggered by many different types of stimuli. It can be affected by chemicals. It can be affected by too much friction. When you do this on your arm, it hurts. It can be from too much pressure when somebody gives you a really painful handshake. Yeah, Maya.
During one of my football games, I literally got elbowed in my face, and she like split my eyebrow open.
Uh-huh.
I literally just sat there looking at my hands. Like I didn't react like at all whatsoever.
Well, that could be because you were more focused on the game at that point, and you probably felt like you had bigger priorities at that point. So that can absolutely happen too. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Epinephrine and norepinephrine can absolutely help with that. Here's the other thing. Your body does make its own endorphins, and those can also temporarily block the pain response.
Could also be due to like shock.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There can absolutely be shock with that as well. And just sometimes pain is on a delayed signal in the first place. Like I was in a really bad car accident when I was 18. And thankfully I didn't really get hurt except for a lot of severe bruising on my chest from the seat belts, kind of locking up. I didn't feel like I got slammed by two cars and spun like 360 degrees in that car and somehow walked out of it okay. I didn't feel like my body had been through the ringer until the day after. Just because it's a lot of damage and your body is not meant to be tossed around that way. So it can be triggered by a lot of different things. It can even be triggered by the activity of your internal organs. If you have too much food in your stomach, that might hurt. So pain can be caused by a lot of different things. So here's what's actually kind of interesting about pain. Most of us do have some memory of our pain, and it does influence it. We tend to remember the pain when it was at its worst, and we remember how much we kind of felt at the end, but we tend to not have a memory of the entire duration of pain. So we don't remember, oh, I was hurting for this many days. Like, for example, when I got COVID back in May, I remember how much my scalp hurt. I tried to run a brush through my hair and my scalp was so tender and so inflamed that it hurt. Even putting a shirt over my head to change my shirt hurt. Getting a shower hurt. That is the worst, like, it wasn't the worst pain I've ever felt. But I remember how much it felt at that time because it was the worst of it. However, I don't remember the full 2 to 3 days of pain and inflammation that I experienced while I had it. I only remember the worst of it. And even then, I don't really remember that much of it at this point. Now, here's something else that's kind of interesting. You feel more pain when the pain ends abruptly than when the pain ends gradually. So researchers actually took people's hands and put them in these buckets of cold ice water. Like I do not like cold. So they would put people's buckets or hands in cold ice water, and then they would either remove their hands abruptly and begin drying off their hands with a towel, or they would put their hands in slightly less cold water. And the people that had their hands removed abruptly actually reported feeling more pain than the people who were just had their hands put in a less cold bucket. So if you ever experience a burn, don't put your hand in cold water. If you burn your hands, put it in warm water first. That can be really damaging to the nerves if you shock the system by going from hot to cold like that. And it's just going to feel worse. Everybody good? Okay, so now we're going to talk about taste. Frankly, folks, taste is one of my favorite senses besides sight, but that's just because I really like food. Like when I was in high school, I think I probably told people, you know what my favorite subject was? Lunch. Don't get me wrong, I like math and science too, but I really like lunch. So when we talk about taste, so I want to clear something up right now. If you stick out your tongue and you notice little bumps, when I was growing up, I thought that those were what were my taste buds. Those are not actually your taste buds. These are what are known, the little bumps on your tongue are what are known as papilla. And inside that papilla, you actually have many different taste buds. So you can kind of see the taste bud here. It is the primary sensory receptor for taste. And here's something that's kind of cool. Unlike hearing and unlike vision, these will regenerate. So if you're like me, you get some pizza, it's too hot, you burn your tongue because the cheese is just too hot. Your taste buds will regenerate. And so one other thing so these are the papilla. There's actually 4 different types, but by and large, your papilla are going to contain many different taste buds. So here is a taste bud. You can see that it kind of has this little gustatory hair. And then at the very bottom, we have the fibers of the cranial nerves. So we have our cranial nerves at the back of the head that actually code for our sense of taste. So they're at the brain stem. So one other thing, how many of you have seen that tongue map that says sweet is in the front, salty is over here? That doesn't work either. Your taste buds code for all possible tastes. They are not just located in one spot on your tongue. That tongue map is a lie. But I do want to talk about our 5 different tastes, although one of those 5 is strongly contested. So we have our sweet taste. You are born liking sweet things. You have an innate preference for sweet things. We also have salt. So we have our salty taste, which is to detect sodium because your body also needs sodium, although most of us are probably getting too much sodium. We have sour, which is designed to detect acids. And then we have bitter, which is originally designed to detect poison, but bitter is basically if you like black coffee. Does anybody here like black coffee? You are very brave. I like my cream with a touch of coffee in it. And then finally, there is a 5th sense that you may have heard of. Some of you may not have heard. This is called umami. It is often present in foods that contain proteins. It also kind of is an earthy taste in mushrooms. And it has been suggested that umami is critical for detecting monosodium glutamate, or MSG. But not everybody believes that umami is an actual taste sense. So there is some debate about umami. And one of these days when I teach sensation and perception again, one of the things I do when we talk about taste is I bring a variety of different foods for people to try for each of those tastes. So for sweet, I bring candy. For sour, I usually bring lemon juice or lime juice. For bitter, I bring tonic water. Tonic water contains quinine, which is very, very bitter. In fact, quinine is so bitter that tonic water usually has a bunch of sugar in it to basically counteract that bitter taste. I like plain tonic water. I don't think anybody else I've ever had in class does. And then oh, you do too?
I forgot, what was the purpose of like tasting sweet?
You have an inborn preference for it. It's basically your body requires things like carbohydrates and glucose and sugar to run. So that is sweet taste basically let us know that something can help us get the nutrients we need. The problem is that most of our foods have hijacked this. We have bread with a ridiculous amount of added sugars in it. Our bread tastes like cake to other people. Like from other countries, our bread tastes like cake. That's how much sugar is in it. Yeah. Like I think in Ireland, Subway's bread was actually reclassified as cake because of its sugar content. No, that is sugar. That is some good stuff. I like Irish soda bread. It's like fruit cake, but better. Okay, so one of the things that's kind of cool about taste is that your senses interact with each other to change how you basically deal with taste. And one of the things that we know is that taste is very strongly influenced by your sense of smell. Did anybody here get COVID and lose their sense of smell? Well, you can lose your sense of smell for a variety of different reasons. You can just have a stuffy nose from a cold and you won't be able to taste stuff. Yeah, Story.
Lost my taste of smell, and then like a few months later after I was COVID, everything tasted like rotten meat for a long time, and I ended up losing like 30 pounds.
I was going to say, and that can happen. I know of a few people that had their whole sense of smell and taste changed, and they're retraining themselves to basically learn it.
It's really, really hard.
I'm sure. Yeah, Tessa.
Okay, so I have a question that I feel like you may or may not be able to answer, but I had a friend who had neck surgery when she was a kid,
Uh-huh.
and then she lost her sense of smell afterwards. Do you know like how like that could like work, or like if any like nerves connect there?
Well, we do have some cranial nerves at the back of the head. So the cranial nerves are for a lot of our different senses for our face, and the olfactory nerve is one of those cranial nerves. So if you have neck surgery and a cranial nerve is damaged, it could very well affect your sense of smell or your sense of taste, because both your sense of smell and your sense of taste are kind of governed by those cranial nerves in the face. Yeah, Luca.
I said that I was actually I still don't really. I lost it about like 5 years ago. I could be assumption like COVID, right?
I didn't mean to make that assumption.
No, it's okay. I had black mold poisoning, and black mold is actually really really offensive to like the.
Yeah, and it will kill you.
That house for about 6 months, and just in the 6 months, I got sick over and over and over again. I feel like I just not smell like this anymore.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry.
It was fine.
So yeah, so one thing that we know is that if your sense of smell is damaged, your sense of taste will also be damaged. And that's because your nasal cavity is a very open cavity and it directly connects to your mouth. So how many of you have had this happen? Like, I grew up in the late 80s, and back in the late 80s, like people really loved spraying hairspray. My mom was one of those people. She had like a whole thing of hairspray, and she would spray her hair while she was getting ready in the morning. And there would be times where I would smell the hairspray, and then I would taste it. Ew, 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 ew. And that's because your nasal cavity and your oral cavity, your mouth, are very strongly interconnected. So your senses do influence each other. And in particular, your sense of flavor is a combination of both taste and smell, because every time you eat a food, you are inhaling its aroma as well. That will affect your sense of flavor of food. But your expectations play a role too. So I'm going to tell you about a really fun study where people were either given egg rolls they were given egg rolls with meat, but half of the people were told that the egg rolls were vegetarian and did not contain meat, and the other half were told that the egg rolls contained meat. Despite the fact that everybody got the same thing, people tended to rate the vegetarian egg rolls as being worse, because there is this expectation that a vegetarian or a vegan option will not taste the same as an option that contains meat. So your expectations affect how you taste things. So my partner, for example, one of the things I like to get at Trader Joe's, and I'm going to Trader Joe's on Saturday, so I'm really excited, is this vegan banana bread. Now, usually for things like vegan banana bread, they use oil in place of eggs to make the banana bread moist. And it's really good banana bread. And I'll give him a slice of banana bread and he'll go, yeah, this is really good. And I go, it's the vegan banana bread. And he goes, oh, now I like it less. So there is this idea that if it doesn't contain like the actual original ingredients, it's not going to taste as good as you think it is. Okay, So finally, we're going to talk very briefly about smell. So I mentioned that smell is the only sense that does not go to the thalamus. So here is your nasal passage. You can see it's a very, very open space. You can see that it does actually connect to the oral cavity. So that's sometimes why when you smell something, you taste something too. And as you are smelling molecules, that is going to make contact with the olfactory nerve and the olfactory bulb. So these are located just above the nose. It is protected by a tiny little bone called the cribriform plate. And by the way, folks, if you damage that cribriform plate, it will potentially damage your ability to smell things. So don't break somebody's nose. Darn it. You were going to break somebody's nose and now I've told you don't. So you can kind of see here, we have these olfactory receptor cells. They code for different types of smells. And that's going to send information to the olfactory bulb located just here above that cribriform plate. And that is where smells are processed. Now, truth be told, I haven't talked that much about taste and smell because there's a lot we still need to learn about smell and about taste. Right, anybody need some more time here? Hannah, Heidi, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, so smell is pretty good for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it does have a relationship to food. If you go and smell some food and it smells bad, that's probably a sign that you should not eat it. Like if the milk smells bad, don't drink it. That is your signal that the food is spoiled. And by the way, folks, I'm going to share something that I learned when I was about your age. When you open up a pack of chicken and the chicken smells bad, don't try to cook the chicken thinking that the smell will go away. Cooking bad smelling chicken is just going to make it smell worse, and you should definitely not eat it. Thankfully, I did not. I called my mom on the phone. I'm like, Mom, the bad chicken still smells bad. She's like, honey, don't eat that. In addition to the relationship to food that this has, it also helps us elicit memories that are associated with emotional events. So smell in particular has a really strong way of evoking memories that we haven't thought about for years. So I remember my mother-in-law basically wearing a perfume that my mom used to wear. And I'm like, is that Calvin Klein's Euphoria? And she goes, yes. And I'm like, my mother used to wear that. Like, it's amazing how smell can be so interconnected with our sense of memory, but there's still a lot to learn about it. Yeah, Cora.
That actually reminds me of something that happened while I was in Germany over the summer.
Yeah.
Part of our tour was we visited Dachau.
Oh, dear.
And when we went to Dachau, one of the things that I made comments on in our discussion that we had 2 days later, was, and I kind of blindsided everybody because I seemed to be the only one who really noticed that without anyone else pointing it out. It was that Dachau inside the camp does not have a smell. There is just a complete absence of it.
Yeah.
Which was really, it just felt off.
Okay.
Because the way I described it was like, because of that connection between scent and memories. Every place has its smell, and you can tell that things happen there based on that smell or what they've done to the place. Hotels have the smell of their carpet.
Oh yeah, you can definitely tell when the dog food plan is running. It smells like feet.
Yeah.
Like occasionally it smells like feet around here because of the dog food plant.
And the fact that Dachau did not smell like anything, it just reminded me how it had been expunged of everything that had happened.
I was gonna say, they better have cleaned that pretty well because it would have smelled very bad.
Yes, yes, it's one of those things that it was not necessarily a bad thing. It just reminds you of that kind of connection that you do have between memories and smell, because that smell is completely gone. That memory is just left to words to tell.
Yeah.
And the structure of stuff behind that were actually rebuilt because they didn't. Because.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just my experience. But of course, we're alongside memories.
Well, thank you for sharing.
I wrote a poem about it. It's actually
All right, everybody good? Okay. So that was the Ames room, but I already kind of talked about that. Are y'all ready to talk about learning and conditioning?
Yeah.
Yay! Okay, I am going to pause it. I am going to pause it really quick because I am going to show you a clip really quick. A case of what we call classical conditioning or Pavlovian conditioning. Beep. Come on. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so now we are talking about learning and conditioning. So here's what we are going to be talking about in this lecture. So we're going to talk about the 3 different ways that we learn. We're going to talk about learning through classical conditioning. We're going to talk about learning through operant conditioning. And for that one, I will show a clip from the Big Bang Theory. And then we will talk about the other way that is especially useful for human beings and primates as well. A lot of learning that we do comes from watching and observing other people. And for that, we are going to watch a video of a child beating up a clown. It is the Bobo doll study. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Bobo doll experiment. And if you are interested, every so often, I do teach a class in learning and conditioning. I will probably not be teaching it within the next 2 years, but probably within the next 3. When I was in school and I took learning and conditioning, we actually worked with a real rat. In this class, we will not be working with rats. We will be working with Snippy, the virtual rat, which is a lot cheaper than working with real rats and real Skinner boxes. And also, we don't have to euthanize the rat after. So it's cheaper and it's more ethical. Yeah.
Why do you have to euthanize the rat after?
Well, you don't have to, but they're not going to, once you've trained them to do certain things, they're only going to be good at doing certain things. I personally would not euthanize the rat, but depending on what experiments you're doing when you use animals, they might be euthanized. There's a reason that I work with people. If I had to euthanize animals, I would cry. But I actually worked with a lot of people in my cognition and neuroscience area, particularly those that were looking at the effects of drugs on the brain. And they did work with rats for that and rat brains, and they did actually euthanize them too. And I'm just like, I'm going to stick with working with humans. I think that's better for me anyway. Okay. So I want you to tell me, what sort of things do you think of when you think about learning? What words come to mind when you think about learning? Yeah, Luca. Classrooms. Heidi.
Digesting information.
Digesting information figuratively rather than literally. Savannah.
Oh, I was gonna say retrieval because I thought we were doing psychological words.
Okay. So retrieval. Okay. So how many of you, when you think about learning, you think about like classroom learning, studying for tests, looking at books, all that stuff? So most people tend to think of taking notes and studying for tests. And let's be really clear, that is a form of learning called cognitive learning. But that's not the only type of learning that there is. So for example, if you go down to the dining hall for your favorite food, so you get there maybe at 12:30 and you discover that your favorite food is not there for the day because it's all gone because you came too late, and you show up a little earlier the next time, that is technically a form of learning. Here's another example. Shockingly enough, we haven't had a lot of thunderstorms yet, but I think as we move later into October and November, we might. I don't like them. I've been partially struck, so I do not like them. But how many of you do this? So what do some of you do when you see lightning flash? You count it. Okay. I do this. And do you know why I do this? Because I know that the thunder is coming and it's going to be pretty loud. That is also a form of learning. I have learned that there is a relationship between that flash of lightning and the noise that it makes. So that is technically a form of learning.
There's lightning. I also make sure my electronics are sometimes they can cause power outages.
Yes, I was brought up in Florida, and do not take a shower during a thunderstorm. I hate it when it's thunderstorming in the morning because I'm like, I gotta get in the shower, and I know it can strike while I'm in the shower and electrocute me while I'm in the shower. That is not an old wives' tale. If lightning strikes the plumbing, it can pass through the pipes. Yes.
So when you got my lightning.
I will tell the story after class.
Okay.
I will tell the story of how I was partially struck after class because we need to move on. Okay. So learning is not just reserved for human beings. Your animals can be capable of learning, and that includes rats, hamsters, and mice.
They can be taught to make cakes.
No, that's no, that picture actually just used to be my screensaver when I was in grad school. Dogs are capable of learning. This fish called a lamprey is capable of learning. Pigeons are capable of learning. Flies are capable of learning. Fruit flies, tiny little fruit flies, are capable of learning. Yeah. Uh-huh.
When it would get a fall out, she would go climb, she would jump up on her igloo.
Uh-huh.
I'd take the lid off, the wall down to where she could climb in.
Uh-huh.
And she would climb in. And I would put it, the lid on and settle down.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, they're pretty good at that. Yeah, Kenna.
Are there any animals that are not capable?
Even cockroaches are capable of learning.
Are there any animals that don't, like, if you repeatedly do something?
I mean, if we're talking about like amoebas and parameciums and stuff, I would say probably not. But in my learning and conditioning class, we talk about a variety of different animals that engage in learning-based behaviors. We are even talking about maggots. Maggots are even capable of learning. Earthworms are capable of learning. Now, it doesn't look like the kind of learning that you and I do, but it is about changing behavior based on experience. And all animals can do that. So this is a pretty famous study from 1946. Yeah.
Is that like learning a survival skill?
Yes, absolutely. Your ability to learn and adapt has enabled your survival, which is why the cockroaches will outlive us all.
Oh, we literally survived the apocalypse.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So what we have here is a pretty famous paradigm called inhibitory avoidance. Animals like rats, mice, and cockroaches tend to prefer dark spaces over light spaces. Light spaces are where they are noticed by other people and are more likely to be killed. But if you wire the dark portion of a chamber with electricity so they get a little electrical shock, they will eventually begin to learn to avoid those spaces. They change their behavior based on experience. So that's really what learning boils down to. It is changing your behavior based on your experiences, and it helps you to adapt. So come prepared to talk a lot about Pavlov's dogs on Wednesday, and we will also talk about operant conditioning. If we look like we're starting to run out of time, I may record, but I'm not, like, I may record a lecture for you, but I'm not ready for that yet. I think we can get through this pretty quickly, but we shall see. All right, everybody have a great day. I will see you here on Wednesday. Don't forget your quiz, and I will see you. We'll talk more about learning next time.
Oh.